All right, brilliant. So we'll get started. First of all, thank you very much to everyone for joining us this morning. This is our second webinar in our new quarterly webinar series called Talking Shop, which we're hosting today on behalf of Capture, which is our specialist commerce media agency that helps CPGs to plan, buy, measure and optimise their retail media campaigns. To introduce myself, I'm Streeter Hurle. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at SMG. It's mine and my team's job to basically help brands figure out some of the answers to the big questions that are going on in the industry at the moment. So things like, which of the new channels should I actually be investing in, which ones work and which ones don't. We're also trying to figure out what the right measurement strategy is for a lot of our clients, and also figuring out some experimentation plans as well for some of the brands that we work with. Previously to working for this business, I used to work for Procter & Gamble, so hopefully I understand a little bit about what it's like from the brand side as well. The focus of today's session is all about retail media from a brand and an advertiser perspective. So the plan for the next hour and a quarter is for us to spend about 20 minutes or so taking you through a short presentation on how we see the world of retail media today. And then I'm going to be joined by some brilliant panelists from across the FMCG industry who will be contributing hopefully to a really insightful conversation as well. If you did want to ask us any questions during the course of this morning's webinar, you can do that. There's a Q&A box where you can submit your questions. If there's anything in there, please pop it in the chat for us. If we get time, we'll answer those questions. If we don't worry, we'll make sure that we follow up on those questions as part of the comms that come out after the session today. So I will let everyone introduce themselves properly later on, but as I said before, we are going to be joined by some speakers from a whole range of different businesses. So we have Michele Dainty from Pladis, we have Joyce-Brown from Accolade Wines, Helen from Kenvue, and Marcus Ingleby, who is the Strategy and Creative Director at SMG, but who's previously joined us having worked at Treasury Wines. So let's kick on with our content. So I guess I'll start by saying something that probably is the opening to all presentations on retail media at the moment. But retail media really is revolutionising the advertising industry, and it's being described by experts as the third wave of digital advertising. But what actually is it? So I've heard a lot of actually quite complicated and even sometimes incorrect definitions of what retail media actually is. But to me, it's really quite simple. Retail media is any media that is owned by a retailer or that's targeted using retailer data. Retail media is definitely not digital only, and nor is it just promoted products. Retail media can be activated in store, on retailers' websites, through CRM and loyalty programs, and as well increasingly today, off-site, through social, through display, connected TV, out of home and search. And so what's interesting about retail media right now is that this category of advertising is evolving very, very quickly. And gone are the days of this type of advertising really being cardboard in store, although enough really of the kind of cardboard bashing, actually cardboard still works very, very effectively according to a lot of our performance data. But what we're now seeing is that retail media can be used to use retail data to sharpen and improve the targeting effectiveness of what was traditionally categorized as upper funnel or above the line channels. And that's what is making kind of big noise in the industry right now. So in case you hadn't heard this, retail media is growing. It's on track to become the fastest growing media channel in 2024, and it's predicted to have overtaken TV spending by 2028, and that's both connected TV and linear TV combined. So the kind of predictions are that people will be moving quite a lot of spend in this direction. From a global perspective, this industry is predicted to be worth about $130 billion this year. And the UK is growing really rapidly and ahead of many other markets as well. So UK growth is expected to be 16% year on year this year, which takes total spending in retail media to about £4 billion. So it's certainly not an insignificant industry. Obviously, Amazon are taking the lion's share of that spending. So they have about a 75% share of the market. But that means there's about £1 billion worth of advertising being spent primarily with retail media networks outside of Amazon. So what is it that's actually driving this growth? Well, it's essentially because the sophistication of capabilities in this space have changed beyond recognition in the last 18 months alone. So starting at the bottom left hand of this slide, the value that brands can get from retailer first-party data has exponentially increased. There's more and better data. We've got more of a requirement to use that data because of the deprecation of the cookie. And that data means that we can measure campaigns in a closed loop way, which is, of course, the holy grail of advertising. Secondly, in my kind of middle red box, we also know that consumers have dramatically changed the way that they shop. So what was once a kind of linear pathway from awareness, consideration to conversion has simply become much messier than that. And that means that there are many more opportunities for retail media to play a role, i.e. it's not just a conversion channel anymore. And then thirdly, and critically, the advancement of new technology has facilitated all of this change. So retailers have been sat on mountains of this data for years. Loyalty schemes started 30 years ago. E-commerce started, nearly 20 years ago. So the reality is this data has been available for years, but it's the emergence of new technology that has made this data usable for the first time. And that's things like the advent of clean rooms, which means that that data can be used in a privacy safe way for the first time. All of this means, in my blue boxes now, that brands can leverage the value of retailer data for the first time, not just in the activation of campaigns, i.e. for the targeting of them, but also for more audience-led planning and also for in-campaign optimization. And that means the way that we run retail media campaigns today is much more akin to how we would have run traditional above-the-line advertising a few years ago. It's a much more sophisticated play. Secondly, there's been an explosion of touch points, both in-store, online, offline as well, in the connected TV and programmatic space. So we have significantly more ways now that we can activate within retail media. And then finally as well, we're seeing brands starting to reinvest national brand budgets into this category of advertising. So it's not that shopper budgets per se are growing, but that actually performance and brand marketing budgets are being repurposed in order to give real firepower to retail media campaigns. Because of all of this, the retail media network landscape is evolving. And so you can see here, this is kind of what things looked like in the early 2010s. So you kind of had two sets of players. You had the kind of big digital players with the likes of an Amazon Ads and the eBay, who are real kind of trailblazers in the digital space. And then you had a couple of key grocery players who were looking at how they could create media offerings that were attractive to brands. So it was a kind of pretty simple landscape really to navigate. But this is what that world now looks like today. So the global evolution, let alone the kind of evolution in the UK over the last 15 years, really has been remarkable. And the latest estimates that we've heard are that over 240 retail media networks exist worldwide today. And I see that as kind of a blessing and a curse if you're a brand. For me, on the kind of blessing side, actually, I'm really excited that this kind of real proliferation in retail media networks means that as a brand, you have real choice for the first time about where you invest your advertising budget. And that choice, the proliferation overall is creating real competition amongst retailers. So no longer can they force brands to spend against certain channels just because that was the way that they did business. Actually, now they need to compete for brand spend in a very different way. And that means that they need to be building marketing channels, services, and capabilities that really work and that become effective choices for brands over the long term. I think that's a really positive shift. And secondly, as well, the growth of retail media networks means that innovation is coming to market much faster than ever before, again, because these retail media networks are competing. And that should also give us the ability to have a whole host of new ways to advertise to customers in a really interesting way. However, of course, there is also a real challenge with this growth, and it's making things incredibly complicated for brands. In reality, there are only so many retail media networks that most brands can work with, primarily for practical reasons, because there's only so much resource, there's only so much budget, and so there is a natural kind of restriction in that. And so actually what we're, I think, likely to see is increasing complexity over the next 12 to 18 months, and then hopefully a real push for consolidation and simplification in the coming months. But that does mean we're at this kind of really crazy time right now where things are moving very, very fast, and we're likely to see this not stopping at all. And this is even more pronounced when you start looking at the kind of ad tech landscape. This chart always makes me laugh because it's just absolutely wild. But this is basically a view of all of the ad tech players that exist as of 2024. So these are all specialist technology businesses exclusively for advertising purposes. Now, a huge proportion of these ad tech players are bringing retail media products to market, meaning that there's a big requirement on both brands and retailers to understand new platforms and figure out which ones actually work. So I think this just hopefully shows the kind of scale with which this kind of sector is exploding, and the potential, again, complexity that we're likely to need to navigate in the coming months. And none of this really has any signs of slowing down. So this is just a snapshot of some of the kind of key headlines that have been in the press over the last few months. The summary of this slide is that everyone is launching something. So you can see in the kind of wake of connected TV partnerships last year between the likes of 4OD and ITVX, working with dunnhumby and Boots Media Group, we're likely to see way more in the kind of connected TV and audio space over the next few months. Equally, we've seen the likes of the Trade Desk, DV360, Magnite working alongside Microsoft to power Netflix's main programmatic offering. All of these partners are launching AI offers at real pace as well. I'm quite excited about that because actually a lot of the AI offers are primarily in the creative development space, which I think is really good because I think we all know that in retail media, creative sometimes can be the last thing that we think about, and it's very, very difficult to develop creative at scale, but AI should hopefully mean that that becomes a lot more possible in the future. And then we've also as well seen some non-traditional retail media networks launch as well, so that's the likes of Uber Ads, PayPal, looking at how they can use their data and their media assets to offer something in a slightly different way to the rest of the market. I think that's quite interesting because there are certain categories where partnering with someone like an Uber could be a really interesting new media opportunity for brands, even if the intention is to drive sales through another business in the future. So again, it's kind of fair to say that there's a lot going on. There are 4 key trends that we're seeing in the UK landscape right now that we think are kind of important ones for brands to be thinking about. And those 4 trends are in-store digitization, new loyalty and reward capabilities, more off-site and clean room opportunities, and then self-service products. So I'll briefly speak about each of these because these are ones that we're spending a lot of our time talking about with clients at the moment. So the first one is the digitization of in-store media. So most people who are on the webinar this morning will probably be familiar with some of the enhancements that are being made in-store by the digitization of all of these channels. And this is giving real alternative choice now to kind of static and paper touch points. Media like this is clearly significantly more dynamic. It's 100% compliant, so it addresses a lot of the challenges of historic in-store activation, and it also presents an opportunity to be far more reactive. So we're often not restricted by the long planning lead times and so on that can come with kind of traditional channels. And the good news that we're seeing is that actually these channels are proving to be really effective. So we've run now quite a lot of studies on some of the new in-store digital channels across a number of different retailers, across different brands, different categories. And on average, what we're seeing is that in-store digital touch points deliver a 2 times greater uplift per store than static touch points. So we can see that actually this type of media is working very effectively. I think we'll see all of the retail media networks launch new digital screens capabilities over the next 12 months. And that again presents a really now interesting opportunity for brands. We just need to figure out how we can manage campaigns across retail media networks much more efficiently. The next series of kind of capabilities that we think are opening up are around new and enhanced loyalty and reward schemes. So obviously loyalty and reward schemes have long been available through the likes of Tesco, Sainsbury's and Boots with the Club Card, Nectar Card, Advantage Card respectively. But in recent years, we've obviously seen more retailers enter this space. So Co-op with the membership scheme, Morrison's via the More Card and so on, as more retailers look to make their data available for more targeted and direct comms. I think this year as well, we'll start to see a real resurgence of more direct marketing opportunities becoming back available again through retail media networks. So that's everything from building more custom loyalty programs in the digital space with brands, loyalty scheme gamification, which we know that a lot of the retail media networks are working on, more loyalty pricing campaigns, so there's an opportunity to participate in above the line advertising, and then more highly sophisticated personalized offers as well. So although this is probably the domain of kind of traditional retail media advertising, actually we think that data will be used now in a whole new suite of channels in order to be activated in a kind of more compelling way. The next big trend that we see is more off-site media partnerships and more retailer partnerships with clean rooms. So we know obviously that there are a number of these offers already in the market. So market leaders probably being the likes of Dunnhumby, Boots and Nectar, all who offer both managed service and self-service capabilities, where you can use their data to activate channels like digital out of home, digital radio, connected TV, and so on. What we're seeing is that the types of approaches that are existing in the market are very likely to proliferate. So we're starting to see more of the data offers being made available through platforms like the Trade Desk, where they're decoupling their data from the media to allow you to buy that data and use it yourself on a CPM basis, to people who are focusing more on providing really sophisticated managed service offerings, where you're buying a package where campaign planning, audience selection, activation, optimization is all included together. And those packages are delivering some very, very strong ROIs, actually better a lot of the time than we've seen through self-service. So I think what we'll start to see is a whole diversification in the types of partnerships, and partnerships now across more channels as well. And then finally, the kind of final key trend is a real push towards self-service models, with more opportunities for brands to be able to book and manage some of this media themselves. So whilst the likes of a kind of Criteo, a Citrus ad have been around for a really long time, and that obviously presents brands an opportunity to, one, build their campaigns on a pay-for-performance basis, and two, to deliver a lot of in-flight optimization. Actually, we're also starting to see some retailers like Boots and Tesco have their own owned platforms in the market as well. They've done Dunnhumby Sphere and Audience 360. Self-servicing is very likely no longer to be restricted just to kind of sponsored products world. Actually, self-servicing will be available through a broader range of platforms like social, display, but also increasingly self-serve across things like connected TV and audio as well. For brands who are starting to have to manage this in-house, actually it's really important to understand all the different self-serve platforms that are out there, and also figure out how to really put the resource behind optimization in order to make this stuff work. A lot of the time we're loading campaigns with data costs that's quite expensive, and that requires a really labor-intensive approach to campaign management in order to get the ROI to work. So if you don't have that support, businesses like ours in Capture have hands-on keyboard services that mean that you can have teams who are dedicated to doing that for you. We've spent a lot of time figuring out how to make that work. So in summary, there's a lot for brands to navigate, and it's an incredibly complicated and fast-moving world right now, but there's also a ton of opportunity out there too. What we wanted to do was share with you a couple of campaign examples of people that we think are doing a really good job. We've got two from some slightly different categories, because I think it's always nice to kind of see inspiration as to how some of these campaigns look. So the first campaign example that we've seen in market recently was from Unilever on behalf of the Hellmann's mayonnaise brand, timed in line with the Euros. What we've seen there is them deliver a really connected omni-channel campaign. So using everything from special build out of home, so you can see on the right-hand side that huge Hellmann's bottle, an on-pack competition mechanic, huge front of store displays and takeovers, in-aisle activations, a whole load of programmatic, and even some big stunt type executions as well through AR. So you can see those kind of table football stunts in Berlin, which they did in line with the Euros as well. So I think what they've done very cleverly is, one, do a brilliant job of connecting the campaign in an actually omni-channel way. Two, being incredibly consistent with their messaging and their creative, so it's easily recognizable across multiple different touch points. And then also going for some big, stunty, PRable activations that have got them some buzz from an industry perspective as well. And then the second example that we wanted to share was Fenty Beauty at Boots. They are another good example of a brand who's really doing shopper-first planning. And this was a launch of their concealer. It was a campaign called We're Even Concealer, which was really about kind of cementing their position as market leaders from a complexion category perspective. They really built a kind of full 360-degree launch plan, which again had digital out of home, digital activation through Audience 360, in-app comms and emails, loads of awareness driving activity on the boots.com site, in-store digital takeovers. You can see the whole front of those Boots stores there being taken over by Fenty. And I think, again, what they did very well was a real mix of high impact channels that really were mass awareness driving, whilst also then having a really data-driven strategy in their off-site to target that activity effectively as well. So I think they're a good example of a brand who's used retail media not just to do a conversion and a performance marketing job, but also a brand development job as well. So what are the implications of all of this for brands? So whilst we've kind of discussed that there's a lot for brands to navigate, and the size of the prize we do think is ultimately much greater than it's ever been before. So the real benefits for brands being that there are so many more opportunities now that exist in the market to make sure that your campaigns will reach the right people. It's also a great opportunity for us to start using some of this valuable commerce data to sharpen the effectiveness of traditional above the line channels. There's also way more opportunity to learn in partnership with other brands. We're making a lot of these kinds of learnings available through our platform Plan Apps, all in an anonymised way. But essentially, as the market is learning, there's an opportunity for brands to learn as well. Really, there is an opportunity for omnichannel to start being a reality. It's still difficult to do, but we are starting to be able to stitch together campaigns at an individual customer level now for the first time. And there's also an opportunity for us to run campaigns that are much more dynamic. So no longer are the days of kind of booking a piece of media, hoping that it goes up and measuring its effectiveness kind of 12 weeks later. Actually, now there are many more channels where we can actually do things in a reactive way and optimize them in flight in order to maximize the chances of them working. But equally as well, there are still some challenges for us to navigate. So we're still all, I think, navigating some historical team structures, budget restrictions and so on internally, where this hasn't been a kind of natural way of working in the past. Equally as well, there is a reality that JMP requirements are making it difficult for brands to move spend around. So even sometimes if you have a real appetite to do things in a different way, contractual requirements with the retailer can be difficult to navigate. And so hopefully we'll start seeing some changes in that space and the way that retailers are thinking about this. 3, very simply, there's a time challenge here. So actually, the market is moving very fast, opportunities are proliferating. That just means there's a heck of a lot to deal with. We're seeing some of the retail media networks that we're working with offering in excess of 300 channels per network. So when you look at the potential opportunities across the broader landscape, assessing and understanding which ones to buy is difficult and it's timely. So that's really important too. 4, knowing actually how much of your budget to allocate towards test and learn can be quite difficult as well. So, of course, we've got a lot of channels that really have been legacy stalwart channels that have existed in this industry for a long time. The reality is, though, there's a ton of new stuff coming out. Trying to balance the tried and tested with the new and experimental is also a difficult challenge, especially when you're having to justify that to finance directors internally. And then finally, as well, actually having in-house capability and resource to do all of this real-time campaign management is also a real challenge. There was a simplicity in the book it and hope that it goes up days. Actually, now we need teams of people who are constantly working in these platforms in order to make this all work. And so one of the things that we wanted to do after the webinar today was to share with you some materials that we thought might be useful. So we're working on what we're calling a new retail media toolkit, which tackles some of the kind of key questions that we know that a lot of our clients and partners are facing at the moment. So we're building some documents that help with new retail media objective and goal setting, that give advice on optimum team and operational setup and sharing best practice from brands that we think are doing it really well. On building an experimentation plan, so building some tools that show you what we think a right test and plan looks like, how to set the right hypotheses and how to measure the effectiveness of those experiments. 4th, how to write the use cases within your business for where first-party data adds value. I think one of the things that we're seeing a lot is all of the retail media networks will tell you to spend on it. The reality is that in some cases, that's hugely beneficial. In other cases, it's not. So it's about identifying where those use cases exist within your business from a marketing perspective, and then choosing those use cases to activate against, We've got a kind of framework that we're building to help you choose where the right places are. And then finally as well, guidance on how to build a clear measurement programme. So how to make sure that you're putting measurement effectiveness at the heart of your overall strategy so that you're spending your money in the best place and optimising over time. So if any of these kind of tools and documents sound like something that could be useful to you, please, if you're working with us already, reach out to your contact within the Capture team and they'll share those with you as those become available. Equally, if you're not currently working with us, but you just wanted to get in touch to find out more, then you can email us on the hello@email address as well. So that's enough of me talking. I would love now to invite our retail media experts into the room. Thank you everyone for shuffling in and keeping me company. So yeah, that was our kind of overview, our scene setting of the landscape. Now, of course, it was an opportunity for us to have a bit of a conversation about the reality of this world, so what it's actually like in practice. We'll just go around the room and give everyone the opportunity to introduce themselves. Thomas, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you, Katie. So hi, everyone. Tom Joyce-Brown from Accolade Wines. Been with the business for a number of years as head of trade marketing. Started my career as a majestic wine, as a lot of people in wine do. So yeah, wine's very much a passion of mine, and it's great to be here today to talk about the trend that is retail media. So thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Michele?
Hi everyone, Michele Dainty. I'm the head of shopper and display at Pladis. Might not have heard of Pladis. I'm hoping you've eaten a lot of our products. We are one of the world leading snacking brands, McVitie's, Jaffa Cakes, Jacob's Cars. I could go on and on and on and on. I've been at Pladis for nearly 2.5 years now, heading up the shopper and display team. But prior to that, I've worked, because I'm really old, in FMCG in a number of roles around shopper, category, sales, HR, you name it, probably done it, but spent a lot of time within the FMCG environment.
Brilliant, thanks Michele. Marcus?
Hi, I'm Marcus. So I'm Director of Strategy and Creative at SMG, but only relatively new into that role the last 6 months. Prior to that, my background is brand marketing, FMCG, so a mixture of creative agency, largely in the activation space, and then more recently, client side, working for Treasury.
And Helen?
Hi there, I'm Helen Onions, Shopper Execution Lead at Kenvue, or Shopper Marketing, Customer Marketing Lead. Again, you might not have heard of Kenvue. So Kenvue, kind of formerly Johnson & Johnson Consumer. So big brands in skin such as Aveeno, Neutrogena, in medicines, Nicorette, Calpol, Benylin. We've also got Listerine and our baby brands. So kind of quite a wide variety of brands across many categories. I joined the business in 2020, and prior to that, my career was all food and drink. So PepsiCo and Hovis. So quite a steep learning curve coming into health and beauty. But some very different challenges for kind of shoppers, and retail media is quite an exciting space to be right now.
100%. And yeah, thank you guys for joining us this morning, because I think everyone will be very interested to hear a range of different perspectives and across different categories as well, which I think is really nice. So we'll get started, because we wrote a lot of questions for you guys. And one of the things that I would love in this conversation is the more kind of like practical advice that you can kind of share would be amazing. So we'll start off all with talking about some of the successes so far of this year. So what's been your biggest retail media win of 2024 so far? Marcus, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think the last 6 months, which sort of coincides with my time at SMG, there's a noticeable change in just the number of briefs, the number of brands that we're talking to, and the conversation that's happening around retail media. So that's a massive win. And I think not just the quantity of it, but then the challenging nature of how do we do this better? How do we harness this? So I think that's a massive one.
Yeah, 100%. Helen?
I think for us, it's the as we start planning, we're planning this year, and as we start planning out 2025, we're seeing a integration of retail media much further up and earlier in the thinking, which is kind of as a result of some of the work we've done over the last couple of years to educate the business on the role of retail media, and I think the engagement that we've got through kind of parts of the business. So I think as we particularly start planning 2025, the allocation of budget, I think, will be, retail media will be better considered within that, and those budgets will be, I think, much more effectively used.
Yeah, which I think is really exciting, and actually probably for the first time this year, we've heard media directors, CMOs talking about retail media for the first time and integrating that into the planning process, which is a big shift. Helen, your biggest win? Oh, sorry. Michele, your biggest win. Sorry.
Very similar to what Helen was saying, in the sense that just the sheer scale of opportunity that you've got within retail media, and gone are the days that I guess the shopper team was sat in a silo in the office. It's part of the conversation, and you're absolutely right, Katie. What you're saying is that CMOs and more senior stakeholders in the business are talking about it. I think the other thing that, in terms of the biggest win, I think for all of us that work in the kind of the arena of this, is just the sheer number of opportunities that are opening up to us. I don't know whether you guys are like me, but I'm out in store pretty much all the time, just looking and seeing. And even as I drive to work, I always stop off at a number of the top four on the way just to see what's going on, especially when their promo cycles change. And just the sheer number of changes in store happening on a monthly basis around the digital area is just, I think, a big win for all of us that operate in this industry. And you talked earlier in your presentation around cardboard. It still is a part of what we do and an important part of it. But I think that the win for us as people that work within it is the digital element that we can play with. So that's what I would say.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, I can echo most of those points really. I think for us as a business, as you know, the power of retail media has kind of come to the fore a bit more, particularly with the touch point effectiveness element. It's giving us a lot more voice from a shopper perspective. So when we start our brand planning process, for example, you know, whereas in the past it might have been we get handed something and then it's our job to kind of make that work from an in-store online perspective. Now it's a lot more around, we're in that conversation right at the start. You know, because we understand what works, you know, in store, online, for example. So therefore, we can contribute a lot more right at the beginning of the process. So I think that's definitely the biggest win from my side, is that it's been way more collaborative this year in our planning and aligned as a result of this, you know, the big trend that is retail media.
Yeah, brilliant. And one of the things that I would really love to know about as well is what your business considers as kind of best practice. So I would love to know if you guys have any examples of campaigns that you hold up internally as being brilliant examples of all of the stuff that we've just talked actually in action. Michele, have you got anything?
So I was thinking about this, reflecting, because I think there is so many I could pick. There's one that's literally went live a couple of weeks ago, which is around a piece of innovation that we've just launched. It's a first to market exclusive for Asda. You're not going to think I'm weird here, but it's Jaffa Cola. Yeah, I'm putting it out there. You need to try it. It's really good. So we pitched as part of the Merchants Den pitch and were successful in winning. But I think why I would pick this out as kind of one of the best in class campaigns that we've done is that it was a true collaboration from supply and our field sales team all the way through to our marketing colleagues. We worked really, really closely with you guys at Capture, but also LS11 to pull together a truly integrated campaign using all the different touch points that are now available, including, can't wait to see these go, is in Asda Express, the digital screens and the large format. So I would say in terms of the most recent one, that is a really great example of everyone working collaboratively, because you can't do it alone. You've got to, you know, rely on the agencies, but also rely on internally people making it happen. So yeah, go out and try it, guys.
I'm really intrigued.
As we speak, but you know what? I should have bought some, shouldn't I? I'm sorry.
And Tom, is there anything from an Accolade?
Yeah, so from my side, the one that comes to mind is a campaign that's about to go live in July. So it's on one of our Australian wine brands, Jam Shed. It's an on-pack competition that's going to be across the off-trade in the UK. It's kind of a free prize draw, so you know, trying to get as much engagement and awareness as possible to make it easy for shoppers to buy into. The reason I picked this one, I guess, again, is you're going to hear this a lot, you know, similar kind of trends and conversations around that collaboration piece. So, you know, we worked a lot with SMG in terms of the planning and understanding what touch points would work. I think as part of that, we've been more aligned than ever on this campaign. And because before, you know, you can walk into a suite of retail media and just be overwhelmed with the amount of choice. Actually taking a step back, having that support to go, you know what, do this, do that, cut out this, cut out that, all built around your objectives has been really, really helpful. So, and again, from our side, from a brand digital trade perspective, we've all been really, really aligned.
Yeah.
And I think that as well, something that's really helped us with that is just having one key objective.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, as marketeers, sometimes we can get quite excited about lots of different KPIs and lots of different measurements, and it's not always the right thing. Sometimes it's better just to have one big thing that you're all going after that it all adds up to.
Yeah.
And that's been really helpful for us as well to kind of really get behind it.
Brilliant. And yeah, great to hear that. I guess there's so much more data now available that we can plan campaigns in that way as well. We can start using this data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, it's probably, I forgot to mention, probably one of the first times that we've been able to use a lot of the evaluations that we've done previously to inform our decisions for this campaign. So it's kind of starting to see the stuff come to fruition, which is great.
Great. I had a question for you, Marcus, which I would love to understand more from a kind of brand perspective, because obviously that's where you kind of spent the bulk of your career. Honest answer, much appreciated. Do you believe that retail media can deliver upper funnel benefits, and can it have an impact on brand metrics or not?
So this is a bit of a passion area of mine, so you might have to stop me talking if I go on too long. I think the base that we're building off is that the linear path to purchase is obviously dead, but that the funnel still exists, and consumers are still going through a process of awareness, consideration, purchase, and then whatever that behaviour leads to in terms of repeat. They're just not happening in the way that it was. So that old idea of overlaying those two things together and building awareness away from store through a set number of touch points of above the line media, and then consideration happening in some sort of long form copy somewhere, and then conversion happening at point of purchase through point of sale, just doesn't exist. Those three stages are happening instantaneously on social media. I do it all the time, where I become aware of something, do a quick bit of research, end up putting it in a basket and buying it. Same as in store, you know, or online. We're seeing MPD launches where that awareness, consideration, purchase is happening in a very short space of time, actually very close to the point of purchase. So I absolutely believe that that retail media can be driving full funnel metrics. There seems to be very little that exists in that space. So if anyone that's watching does have any research papers that they've got of retail media driving upper funnel, I'd love to see it, but we're in the design phase at the moment, looking at how we build a couple of research studies so that we can shine a bit of a light on that and demonstrate how much is it influencing and how and what's doing it best. So watch this space.
Which I'm excited by. We have a whole load of hypotheses, don't we, of things that we think may or may not be true that we're going to try and test out over the next 12 months. So yeah, fingers crossed we'll be able to share them more on that.
I think as well, like the retailers are some of the retailers are such highly trusted, you know, some of the retailers we deal with in healthcare are such highly trusted kind of, you know, entities that actually delivering almost adds to, I think, the equity of a campaign. So, you know, all the way through from the top of the funnel through to conversion. So I think that's a real advantage that they've got. Yeah,
and then Mesh did some really interesting research on that actually, on Boots and the kind of brand effect on it in terms of endorsement and advocacy. And actually a lot of the media really does have this kind of implied endorsement from the retailer, which is very powerful and actually has a really significant effect for consumers. So that's another interesting angle that I guess we don't always kind of talk about. I guess on the flip side of all of this kind of good stuff, there are also lots of challenges that are kind of existing for all of us in this world at the moment. Helen, I wondered if I could ask you, what's the biggest challenge that you've been facing in retail media, and if you've got any solutions to it or things that you've tried to do to fix it, what have they been?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of alluded to it earlier, and I think we're starting to make some traction. You know, Kenvue is a huge organisation with a huge number of brands across a variety of very different categories, from sensitive skin to stop smoking to kids for Helen. So the big thing for us was around the structure, and that we've obviously got our sort of more traditional shopper team, which is not just cardboard now. It's a huge range of media channels that we can work on. We've got an omni-channel team who work with our retailers on their on-site media, and we've got a digital media team that work off-site. So how you knit all of that together to talk to, you know, I guess produce a plan or a proposed plan that covers 360 part of that, you know, that journey is a challenge. And also linked to that, the education of the broader business, as we also touched on earlier, how we do that. So what we've done is we've got some leads from each of those areas. There's a team of kind of 5 or 6 of us that cover digital, on-site and shopper. And we're not precious about the channel that we work in, and we understand more than probably most people the broader implications of bringing it all together. And what we've done for 2 years running is we've done a big kind of retail media immersion session, a full day, invited our full commercial marketing teams to it. We've had SMG present around the rise of retail media, what it is, kind of demystify some of it. We've had some of our retail media networks come and present at that as well, and we've had really, really positive feedback on. I think quite a lot of light bulbs have started going on, and hence I think we're starting to see the progress that I think we're seeing as we start planning out 2025. So for us, there are challenges with retail media itself. We talk about standardisation, measurement, and all of that. But I think that to crack that for us to start with, it's been a really big shift.
Yeah, and I think that internal education piece is a massively important point as well, isn't it? Because the reality is that retail media isn't just a shopper touch point, it affects a number of teams, like in some organisations, 5, 6 different departments working together cohesively, all with completely varying degrees of understanding, knowledge, experience in this space. So I think that point is really, really key. Did you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I absolutely echo what Helen's saying. In fact, we had a very similar session just a few months ago with our brand team. I think also on the flip side, the education piece with our commercial colleagues and our customer teams. In fact, I was in a customer leadership team meeting yesterday doing a session on retail media, because I think we've all got to work together, because there's large amounts of money that we're spending through these retail media networks. The question is how and if can they leverage those commercially? That's the challenge I gave to those guys. But I think the other thing that we also need to be mindful is that we are in some cases tied up with commercial agreements with the retail media networks themselves. So it's harder to kind of put away when it's not the right thing to spend. And that's probably, you to ask me my biggest frustration, it probably is that. And some networks are probably, I guess, cleverer, you could say, or harder to kind of crack in terms of what they see and the job to be done. And so I think the biggest piece that we've got is that education piece, not just internally but externally as well, because we're all in it to grow, drive category growth, drive sales, and ultimately excite our shoppers or consumers at every single touch point. We're all in it together. It's just making sure that we are really, really clear in terms of what those objectives are. Definitely the education piece, and I think it's on its way, but there's more that needs to be that needs to be done.
And actually that leads me, I'll go slightly off piece, but also on the same topic, for a slightly different question, which is around the skills that are needed to work in retail media now, because I guess this is kind of a real topic. So what are the skills that people need now if they're kind of working in the retail media space, and how might they differ from what was required a few years ago? Marcus, do you have a perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of seems to me there's no better time to be in shopper marketing than right now. The attention and focus it's getting, the seat at the table, the inclusion earlier in the process are all amazing prospects for anyone in this space or getting into this space, and is an opportunity for development and progression of careers. But I guess the demands on it are more than they've ever been, and it's a really full 360 skill set, from strategy to execution, data to creative. And I think, you talk about that education piece, I think that stakeholder management and communication must sit at the heart of all of that, because when we're trying to bring in people that don't quite understand it or aren't as conversant in this space as some other people, that ability to bring it back to a shared objective, to a KPI, and align people behind it has to be one of the biggest skill sets that are needed at the moment.
That's very fair. Thomas, did you have a view on that one?
Yeah, I think for me it's as things become, data becomes more abundant, and we've got more options from a retail media perspective. I think it's really key that from a shopper marketing perspective, you still focus on the so what. Because again, you can get lost in all of this information and performance data that you've got. But it's really like, well, what does it mean, for our business and for growth? So I think sticking to the so what is the important bit. And part of that as well is almost having a bit more of a commercial mindset, because I think now that we've got this information that tells us how things are performing, it's like, well, what does that mean from our like driving revenue? You know, you look longer term, you look at kind of customer lifetime value, you know, we can start to forecast what our media is going to deliver. So I think from a shopper perspective, actually, it's almost becoming closer to commercial. We can really drive that longer term revenue growth with our plans.
Yeah.
So it's just, keeping simple, focus on the so what, and then that a bit more of a commercial mindset with the data that we've got.
Yeah, very fair.
I mean, I think there are roles that will exist in the future. We're starting to see them come through in some organisations that don't exist right now.
Yeah.
Those job specs will look very different to a traditional shopper marketing manager of old. I think, you know, I'm encouraging kind of people within my organisation to get that experience across, you know, how I see like the 3 areas in terms of traditional shopper, on-site, digital. And I think to both your same as you guys, I think we're going to need to be much more commercially literate, you know, analytical than potentially creative. So that's still very important. So, but maybe that role is slightly different somewhere else within the organisation. So very much encouraging at the moment while things are still sitting separately to go get that experience as you're kind of coming up through the career. But I think some of those roles as integrated, you know, retail media comms roles or retail media management roles, I think we're already starting to see them, right? So yeah, it will come through.
Yeah, and you know, I know even within our organisation, because you know we're doing the same kind of work. We're having to bring in people with a whole host of new specialisms that didn't exist previously. You know, people who can be in platform, figuring out how you make the most of all of these campaigns and really make them work. If you're in Meta or if you're sat in the trade desk, kind of doing that stuff, or data scientists who are looking at how you build the right audience profiles to target and kind of mine all the data effectively. So it's definitely a kind of space that seems from a skills perspective to be shifting really quickly. We're definitely asking a lot of people at the moment. One of the kind of big themes of the conversation that we've had so far has been collaboration and trying to kind of stitch together the different bits of businesses to make all of this work. And I guess in theory that sounds great, but practically that's very, very difficult to do in kind of most businesses. Have you got any kind of practical examples for kind of people that are dialing in trying to figure out how to do this, of how you've managed to create that collaboration between teams? Michele, have you got any?
Yeah, I think what we've done, and I think we've done really well, is within Pladis, the shopper and my team sit within marketing.
Yeah.
We moved a few years ago from sales, so into marketing, and we are right at the centre and at the start of those conversations. So when we're looking at campaigns or even creative as well, the shopper is involved right from that stop. So that cross-agency collaboration with the above-the-line agencies and the below-the-line agencies, there's no blur. We're just I'm going to say one big happy family in that sense. So that we are starting those conversations. We're challenging. We are having some really open and frank conversations. So I think that is how we have been successfully and shifted our kind of mindset. So I think, Helen, go back to one of your comments earlier around, you know, it doesn't really matter where that budget sits, it's the job that's got to be done. And I think breaking down those barriers of it's my budget, it's your budget, it's the business's budget to do the job. So I think that is one that worked really, really hard to do, is to get all the agencies working together and not being precious about it. It's the job that's got to be done.
Yeah. Well, I think looking in a crystal ball, I'd like to think that in the future, it's just all media.
It is,
Yeah. We have to break down those barriers and that sort of parochialness about, well, that's mine, that's yours. Think about, be really clear on what the consumer and shopper objectives are and how do we best leverage all the different channels available and data and, you know, visibility in store to kind of hit those objectives.
Yeah, 100%. And then I guess in the meantime, use some of these like sort of slightly manual stitching processes sometimes to do that in the absence of that being possible. And Thomas, is there anything that you guys are doing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's very much been about talking about the performance. So like just demonstrating that we understand how touch points perform. I think that always gets people excited internally in different functions. You know, particularly in finance, if you can say, oh, we know that this is going to deliver 30% uplift, it's kind of like, oh, okay, that's good to know. Great, let's tell me more. So I think that's how we've kind of started to engage the business a bit more, is just demonstrating that, you know, we think this can deliver X. I think that's really powerful, and then people want to bring you naturally into the mix into that planning process.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I guess the evidence makes that conversation.
And using platforms like Plan Apps is really great at being able to do that and take that marking your own homework out of the you know, very objective.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, one of the kind of hot topics at the moment is retailer first-party data and how we can be using it and applying it to a lot of campaigns. In all honesty, we've run some campaigns that have been phenomenally successful using that data, and some that have been less so, where we've kind of impacted the ROI that we've seen. And actually, you could have a very effective campaign from a mass marketing perspective, but there are obviously certain categories where using that data is genuinely valuable and can make a big difference. I guess, Helen, perhaps from a Kenvue perspective, you guys have some categories where that use of third-party data can be really valuable.
Yeah.
Have you got any examples that you can talk to us about how you kind of use that successfully?
Yeah, I think there's a real huge opportunity to leverage first-party data. There are also some challenges, kind of frustrating challenges in it as well.
Yeah.
I guess an example from some of our brands where they're relatively, targeted, stop smoking.
Yeah.
A proportion of the population that are smoking and a proportion of them that want to stop. So we can use first-party data to target those shoppers that have bought into our product, or shown an interest in our product, and then target them through using first-party data, which is really, really valuable. Obviously, talking about baby products as well, you want to be talking to people that are currently buying baby products. So there's a big advantage there in being able to do that, and that's something wouldn't have been very hard to do, a few years ago. The sort of slightly frustrating challenge is that there's a lot of sensitivities around some of those categories. And so whilst we can't, the sensitivities around building sort of lookalike, you could build like a lookalike audience to then go, it looks like they are smokers, so let's go and target them. Retailers, there's quite a lot of restrictions around whether we can go do that, because there's again sort of sensitivities around it. So it comes like, look what you could have, but you can't have it all. So huge advantages and opportunity. There's also inconsistency between different retailers as to who we can target and who we can't with that first party data. So it makes it quite hard to build a strategy. Well, it's the strategy, we can't activate it here and here, but we can do it here and here. So I don't need consistency or just kind of visibility of those. Sometimes we go so far down the line, it's actually, no, we can't do that because. So so a real great advantage, I think, for smaller brands. Some challenges around sort of sensitive brands.
Yeah, that's very fair. And I guess there are some really interesting use cases, like in the examples you gave, things that are kind of high consideration categories where you need to be activating people over kind of a long period of time, or categories where you're either in or out market, like baby care being a kind of perfect example of that. So there are some fantastic use cases. Again, it's just about building those appropriately and then figuring out the right strategies to target people within them. On the topic of data as well, so we know that often brands want more data behind a lot of their kind of activations on campaign performance, and particularly there are kind of a lot of asks of the retail media networks to be measuring appropriately and making that data available. What would your kind of number one ask of those retailers be when it comes to the type of measurement that they provide? Thomas, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think we probably have done a similar thing, but I think from an e-commerce perspective, I think that's a big one for us. Is that it's the consistency piece across e-com. So obviously from an in-store perspective, we're starting to get great consistency now with the help of FG, so the work you've got on. Our plan apps is, we know comparatively what works in store, which is great, apples to apples. But from an e-com perspective, everybody's got different models they use. I think, where a lot of the time we're one layer deep on the information that we get. I think particularly around the conversion attribution modelling. So everybody's got a slightly different model for that. So it's really, really difficult to understand if your performance is good or not. So for me, it's all around that e-commerce piece. I feel like that's the big missing element.
I would absolutely echo what you're saying. I think it's the differences in PCAs that you get back and trying to decipher what it is they're actually telling you, because we've not mentioned the word, I don't think, Katie, standardisation.
Thank you, Michele.
But I think that would be super helpful. I mean, I'm sure you guys are the same. I have to justify every single pound that I spend. And if I can't, to your point around talking around e-commerce in particular, demonstrate the effectiveness of it in a coherent and tangible way, won't unlock the money. So
Yeah.
I mean, that is the one thing that I keep banging on about, is that the standardisation of the measurement. And so we are all talking about apples with apples, not apples and pears, but also being able to justify that that spend.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think in defence of the retailers, every now and again, I think there are some real problems from a tech perspective of the stuff, which is sometimes causing that stuff, where in reality they actually can't get attributed sales from some of those platforms. Believe it or not, that is actually the case. But I wholeheartedly hear that. I also think sometimes there's a little bit of reticence from a retailer perspective, because they're concerned that they're being the first to share that stuff, that they will get under kind of even more scrutiny from brands. Actually, I don't believe that to be true. I think there's a first mover advantage on some of that, and making that data available for the purposes of helping people direct spend to the places that are going to sell more products is kind of good.
If anything, I think it would benefit, because there is more opportunities. We often, if we want to go after incremental spend and with our business, we have to put together a business case. So the more tangible or credible those measurements are, I'm going to say the easier. It's not easy to get. I'm not more spend, but it makes it more credible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, they want us to include more in them, and therefore having that standard approach and transparency is only going to be helpful.
Just help you make
It will
things
a lot more investment for them, if anything.
I totally get that. One of the kind of big themes from the presentation at the start of the webinar was around innovation and the kind of whole lot of new stuff that's coming to market all the time. Can you share any examples with us of kind of innovative approaches or technologies that you've started to use from a retail media perspective? What type of stuff have you been testing, Marcus?
So from a near-in point of view, I think we've spoken a lot about in-store digitisation and the testing that we're doing on its effectiveness versus paper-based or static equivalents of it. But I think probably the more interesting part of that is the dynamic creative optimization that we're looking at. How do we utilise the flexibility of that real estate in a more effective way? Looking a bit further out, I've spoken a bit about the kind of full funnel measurements, also looking at the use cases of connected first-party data, third-party media, and looking at the effectiveness versus the cost of harnessing that data, and where does that deliver a positive return, and how do we use that? Things like marketing science, and looking at the importance of bringing new consumers into brand, and how effectively can we do that, as opposed to just looking at something a bit more blunt like return on ad spend, where you could be claiming existing purchase behaviour. How can we measure new to brand consumers better and get a little bit under the skin of what's driving that, and are there better and more effective ways of doing that, and what value does that bring in the short term, but over I think you spoke about lifetime value equation. So the list just goes on and on. There's so much that we're testing.
I think the things that I'm really interested in understanding about that are the longer term effects. I think sometimes as an industry, we're a little guilty of just measuring campaign on campaign, which gives you tons of information. That's very, very helpful. But how do we start understanding longer term impacts over time and aggregate impacts across multiple campaigns? That's something I don't think we've cracked. I'm hoping that we can make some strides on that over the next few years. Did you have anything?
I guess a couple of quite different examples. One, we're using AI in terms of our analysing our kind of creative. We haven't touched on a huge amount on creative, but obviously it's great having all the different channels, but if we haven't got the right creative in the right channel, then you're not maxing it out. So our shopper marketing managers will use a very quick AI tool to analyse key visuals, but then also the application of that, whether it's on a floor standing unit or on a kind of an online banner, and very, very quickly, literally in 5 minutes, have some feedback on that. We have to make those changes. So I think that's quite a cool thing that we're doing, and it's really where we want to be with that creative. We're very much about ensuring we've got the right brand assets that are seen at the right point all the way through that kind of funnel. And I guess the other one was around, we talked earlier about, the retailers now are, media agencies in their own right, so actually using them not necessarily just for conversion, but as a piece of work we're doing on quite a targeted product, just driving to the retailer's site to then have quite a long form piece of copy, which isn't traditionally something that they would have on their kind of purchasing sites, which is very neutral, not branded, very educational, but then at the bottom taking them to a branded banner to click through to purchase. So that's a trial, that's I think it's either gone live or about to go live. But use not necessarily just using them for that conversion, but utilising their channels for all sorts. So
just picking up on that sort of first AI point, I think not only is it helping us deliver better creative that then delivers better results, but it's also taking that subjective nature out of creative. And a lot of us can see when creative is not fit for purpose for the channel that's being deployed. But the AI is helping us talk about why isn't it and what's the difference in effectiveness. So we're totally the same, finding good use of it.
Right. Another question for you, Marcus, which was, what advice would you give to brand marketers about how they can start to use some of their retail media thinking, capabilities, data in the type of work that they're doing?
Yeah, I think there's got to be a natural curiosity to lean into this new space and at least be conversant about what are the capabilities, what can it deliver, how might you use it. I think I saw a great chart before I took the job here that compared monthly audiences of traditional above-the-line channels like TV, and then compared it directly to monthly visitors into the retail environment. And if you take out the fact that that's a channel where our product is sold and look at it as a media audience in a pure form, and then start evaluating it in terms of what's the quality of that audience, but also how receptive are they and how relevant is the message that we're delivering, I think that could really help us sort of mind shift in more pure brand marketers' point of view in how to utilize this space and just how to evaluate it and just do that piece of kind of comparison on it. So
I think that's a great point. I think there's a stat that sometimes does the rounds, which is that the average weekly number of shoppers in a Walmart is greater than the average Super Bowl audience. But people see that as kind of one type of channel, Walmart being another. Actually, the reality is that these retailers have phenomenal audiences, and if you consider them just in their own right are very interesting. Plus the fact you can buy on top of them makes it obviously a very powerful kind of concept. And then what are some of the trends that you guys are kind of keeping an active eye on in the market, and how are you thinking about how you might adapt to them? Michele, is there anything that pladis are keeping an eye on?
I think the digital elements and all the different things as I was talking about, and being able to geographically change your copy. Even like, I think we were with Tesco Connected Media the other week, and we're talking about changing the accent on radio when you're in different stores in different parts of the country, and how that resonates with shoppers even more. I think that's super exciting. I'm also intrigued as these networks grow bigger and I guess stronger, how they're going to start competing with one another, and how they're going to make sure that they're getting all the money they can in the investment. But how are they? Is it going to make it cheaper? Question. I don't know, but I'm intrigued as to what's going to happen as some of the retailers have been slower off the mark into the world of retail media and the power and the opportunity it's got. I'm just intrigued as to how it's going to play out over the next number of years. Any consolidation as well.
We'll see what happens there. I think the competition is a really good thing, because I think it means that everyone's going to have to really up their game, and that's everything from the measurement capability to the service layer that gets wrapped around it, all of that kind of stuff. I think it's a really positive thing for brands, actually.
I think as well the discounters haven't necessarily come
not yet.
So that's what I've got in my mind, these your levels, high street discounts, and how they're starting to build up data.
Absolutely.
Where's that going to go? And I think for me, sort of building on that, it's like this kind of almost like this gold data that the retailers are richer than anything else we've got. How are they going to scale and kind of commercialize that beyond maybe media into almost they use that data insight to sell it in its own right. Nielsen, help us eventually to inform those brand strategies, because they understand the nation better than kind of most other people. So that's going to be an interesting one.
For sure. Well, I think the kind of frequency of recency of grocery data makes it a really interesting data set, not just for FMCGs, but even more broadly as well. So absolutely. I think we've got time for one more question. If I gave you a magic wand, what would you want to see from the retail media networks that you partner with? I'd love everyone to answer that question. I think we've just about got time. Thomas, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think it's the first party data piece, linking that to the performance side of it.
Yeah.
So like, we know what performs from a retail media perspective. How does that link into shopper behaviour change? What are we trying to influence?
Yeah.
I think at the moment, the two things are almost in isolation, and we're having to bring them together ourselves as brand owners. So like if they can bring that together themselves, that'd be really, really powerful.
Yeah, so kind of deeper, richer metrics.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Michele?
I think, well, the standardisation, I'm going to keep going on about it, but it, you know, we work with them all.
Yeah.
How can we articulate it in the same way? And at the moment we can't. It's a bit tricky.
Yeah, that's very fair. Marcus?
I'd probably say collaboration. I think we'll all benefit when we're all challenging each other and pushing each other further. And I think that's only going to come through with some flexibility, some transparency, and a willingness to lean in and try and do some more cutting edge stuff together.
Yeah, great. Helen?
Same. I think standardisation of measurement across channels and across retailers. You know, and bringing that where we've got, you know, your big campaigns. How do you get an overall total campaign, you know, evaluation across all channels? We talked about a bit with the Plan Apps guys yesterday. That really helps us. That will force, you know, the different parts of businesses, if they are different, to come together, because it's looking at it at a completely holistic view. And I think it would then force that kind of mindset shift around, this is how we should be looking at it with total campaign point of view, total media, not retail, brand.
I think that macro perspective is the big shift.
We can report campaign performance at a kind of, you know, a more holistic level. I think that would force that conversation and be with the, you know, the right stakeholders within the business.
Absolutely. Listen, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us this morning. That was a very interesting conversation too. Thank you for all of your contributions. I hope that everyone found that helpful. We've obviously got a kind of recording of this morning's session that we will share and post our kind of session today with some of the key takeouts. Equally as well, if you did want to get hold of any of that retail media toolbox contents, any of those kind of planning frameworks, first party use case experimentation guidance and so on, please get in touch. We'll very happily share that with you as well. And then the final thing just for me to mention was that SMG do run an annual event called Retail Media Summit. That is happening again this year on Wednesday, the 16th of October. It's based in London, and we've got representatives from across the whole industry speaking at the day. It's a really packed agenda. We've got clients there, retailers, ad tech partners, agencies. So there's a lot of very interesting perspectives that will be shared. If you did want to come along on that day, we'd be delighted to have you there. Again, information on how to sign up and register for that event will be shared in the comms post today. But thank you very much. Appreciate it. Bye.